aspects of God's nature, both in terms of intimacy and in terms of ultimacy. God, in Jeremiah, the first chapter, there is a testimony to God's intimacy. God imagines great things for Jeremiah, and he fills the young prophet with energy and inspiration. And God works with and through Jeremiah's gifts, respecting his life situation and his agency. And so it is with God working with us, respecting our life situation and our agency. God is at work in each of our lives, and God's vision for us is concrete, not abstract. God addresses particular persons in particular settings at particular times, like you and me. Came as a great surprise at age 66 that God said, "You're not going to retire. Get back to work, go to the seminary." This involves God's choices and our responses, and always pushes us beyond our own plans. Amen. Moment by moment, over the long haul. God's vision is not limited by our sense of inadequacy, but can use small beginnings, young people, small churches, to do great things. The church is a challenging place to be, where gifts, possessions, vocations are to be purposefully nurtured as our contribution to making God's vision of on earth as it is in heaven come true. God's vision can never be reduced to our plans. It's always more than we can ask or imagine. Psalm 71 continues the theme of intimacy and protection. We are in God's circle of care. And while this does not guarantee smooth sailing, it promises us that God is with us in every moment of our lives. God's faithfulness is present with the gift of an open future and the assurance that God never gives up. And God provides the energy and possibility for our life situation. The Hebrew readings calls for intimacy and majesty. It's one of the most difficult readings to understand. And I'm not going to do the interpretation of it for you today. You don't have that much time on Sunday. It's a difficult passage. So I want to introduce to you Eugene Peterson's different paraphrase. Quote, "Do you see what we've got? An unshakable kingdom. And do you see how thankful we must be? Not only thankful, but brimming with worship, deeply reverent to God. For God is not an indifferent bystander. God is actively cleaning house, torching all that needs to burn. And God won't quit until it's all cleansed. God is fire." Hebrews reading is very difficult, but that's a good introduction to what he's trying to say. Luke continues the theme of intimacy and an uncontrollable God. Our religious systems, rules, and doctrines only point to the divine. they cannot contain God's energy and love. So let's spend some time with the gospel story. There's a curious phrase at the beginning of the reading. The phrase is crippled by a spirit for 18 years. 18 years probably means a long time. It's a little bit too much for us to assume that number literally. Most of the numbers in the Bible are representatives of lengths of time and not accurate statements of what we call time. Time, as we know it, was not known in Jesus' time and Luke's time. Bible scholars have looked at this phrase, crippled by the Spirit, by a Spirit. And the best scholarship that we can find says we just don't know what that means. We do know that in the time of Luke, obviously a pre-scientific time, people were faced by the unknown and attributed the unknown to actions of spirits, like nature, to a good or an evil spirit. Sometimes the spirit of evil was called Satan. We also know that illnesses were frequently attributed to sin. That sin could be the sin of the person, and they became afflicted. The sin could be that of the parents, and became inherited sin, like the sins of parents that would be visited on the son and future generations. In this scene, Jesus singles out this woman who is bent over and invites her to come. Probably greatly embarrassed, she moves forward and Jesus says, "Woman, you are free from your infirmity." He puts his hands on her. She straightens up and begins praising God. Wow. Think about it. She's been burdened for a very long time. She sits in the back of the synagogue, drawn by the worship of God, but ashamed of her infirmity. How long has she done this? Shockingly, Jesus calls her. She's embarrassed by being singled out, but she responds. Jesus says one sentence, places his hands on her, and she's restored to health. Friends, that's the way we need to have people respond when they come to this worship service, whether in person or online. It's here where true healing can occur. Sometimes people come having experienced the worst that life can dish out. And it's up to us to make sure that they are here safe, free, and find a healing station. Healing is often not of the body, but of the spirit or of the mind. It's pretty easy to become downtrodden. A surprising health problem like a diagnosis from out of nowhere, a broken or breaking relationship, no relationship, a traffic accident, maybe even depression or sheer loneliness, or the results of a trauma like PTSD. This is the place to come. Maybe to sit in silence and let the worship of God wash over you. Maybe reach out and touch someone longing for the simple touch of another human being. Maybe a sympathetic, non-judgmental ear to listen to heartaches. Maybe a confession of a wrong done. that gnaws on the soul. Maybe it's just a laying on of hands by caring people akin to healing touch. That's what a worship place service is supposed to be, a healing place. And God is the healing agent. The second half of our gospel reading is a debate between Jesus and the leader of the synagogue. This is one of the funniest sections of the New Testament. How dare Jesus heal on the Sabbath? After 18 years, this woman could just as easily been healed tomorrow. You can almost see the beginning of the scene on the fiddle of the roof. Tradition, tradition, tradition. Once again, God presents Jesus as the Lord of all, including the Sabbath. And he presents Jesus' work as not delaying a single day. Time is of the essence. Jesus was here right now, not later. Jesus is here right now, not tomorrow. This is the day we encounter him. Not tomorrow, not next week. We encounter him right there at this table, right when we receive the host and perhaps the wine. Right now is the time of decision and healing. Jesus points out the irony of the situation. People felt quite free to water their animals, but not their fellow Jew. They would have to wait till tomorrow. Jesus confers a label on the woman. He calls her daughter of Abraham. Of course, she was Jewish, naturally a daughter of the Abrahamic tradition. No, she was the daughter of Abraham. The woman was accorded the distinction and given the same as the sons of Abraham. Luke breaks the tradition and accords the woman, a woman, status in the community. Jesus doesn't play the same field with the Jewish tradition. He sets his own rules. Luke's gospel account seems to go overboard by recognizing women. Maybe there was a Mrs. Luke doing some backseat driving. But I suspect that Luke was trying to get a point across, that there was no second-class citizen in God's kingdom. Being a woman, or a crippled woman. Whatever, Jesus was going to heal her on his own terms. Scholars have noted that this section of Luke is full of reversals and inversions. And this is one of those things, thanks be to God. Luke told us about economic justice and the importance of being watchful, waiting for the master. And the servants will find that the master will serve them. Those are the readings that we heard just prior to this one. And then we heard the healing, the fire of purification. We're to honor God before all else and have God's way be our priority, even if this means we have to join a different family, the family of God. We have to recognize the reality of today as the only critical reality. Reversals and inversions are part of the story of God's answer to human needs. And it's because we let rules get in the way. And sometimes those rules are backwards from what God intends. So what was the purpose of the Sabbath anyway? Of course, it was to celebrate creation, and it was to allow people to create or concentrate their energies on worship. What better way to worship God than to heal the afflicted? Luke wanted to make that point very clear. Jesus is superior to the Sabbath. He is the Sabbath rest. And Sabbath is a journey, not a destination. Sabbath with Jesus is a journey, not a destination. For quite a few years now, I have been receiving a daily poem from a poet named Stephen Garnis Holmes. He's a retired United Methodist pastor living in Maine right now. And I can't believe it, but Steve Garnis Holmes produces a gorgeous poem every single day. And you can subscribe to his poems. Listen to this one. It's based on the gospel reading. There appeared a woman with a spirit who had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. The poem. What's bent over in you? What is pushed over, put down, made weak, or silenced? What beauty is hidden? What capacity stilled? What in you is bound up, distorted, facing downward? Have you given up on hope? How have you been told that you can't? That you deserve it? That this is not the time for healing? Let the bent over woman in you come forward. Let Jesus lay a healing hand on her. Don't expect instant change, but know this. The spirit that distorts you is not as strong as love.